Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Moppert here, joined with our Bills and NFL insider Vic Carucci today. After the Bills fell in their regular season finale to the New England Patriots, 23-16, the final score, as they now fall to 13-4 on the season. But Vic, the main point and the main goal of today was accomplished, and that was really just to stay healthy, not to mention to let a couple of the players kind of cash in on some of those incentives. I guess my question to you is, what does that say about the Bills organization, the fact that they kind of went out of their way for a couple of different guys to really make that happen?
There's no question that there's a bit of a marketing ploy, if you want to call it here, to future free agents, guys who could join this team perhaps next season, who look at this organization or hear about some of these good things that are done for the sake of the players. Now, success matters the most, and when you're going into this game already locking up the number 2 seed and really position well to make a serious postseason run, that helps. But yeah, Sean McDermott and the coaching staff and Brandon Beane, the GM, they faced some, as Sean described it, some delicate balance to allow players to play enough to hit some of those financial incentives, and a few of them did and got some extra cash, and also hit some milestones, but not playing so much or too much that there was a risk for injury. This is basically a team that came out of this game, it seems, really healthy, and will go into the playoffs as healthy as they've been in a long time.
And something that I wanted to talk about that falls into that category is just the fact that we knew Josh Allen was not going to play long. But when they said not play long, Sean McDermott meant it. He went in, Josh Allen went in for one snap. He handed it off to James Cook, and that was it. That was his day. He ran off the field. It was Trubisky time. I guess my question for you, as someone who votes on the MVP every single year, is, do you feel like Josh Allen's MVP case, now that really his is a 16-game situation versus, Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, where they both played all the way up until the end, 17 full games, does that really make much of a difference when you're kind of evaluating it all together?
I don't think it does. I'm going to speak strictly for myself. There are other voters involved. It's a pretty large panel of voters, and maybe people have different ideas. For me, I'm not getting caught up in the fact that the numbers are better for Lamar Jackson, for Joe Burrow, and they were better with Jackson even before he played their final game of the regular season, but I against Cleveland. But I think if it was just a numbers discussion, you can pour those into some sort of computer program and come out with, okay, better numbers, got to be the MVP. That's not what this is about. There's an eye test to this. There is meaningful performance and what was done during the course of all these performances in weighing the body of work. So I don't penalize Josh at all for not having a full 17-game season to measure his worthiness. He's made his case, and a very strong one. The others have made their cases. Those are strong. So there's a lot for this panel to consider. It might end up being a pretty divided vote. I wouldn't be shocked if that were the case, just because of so much discussion that's hovered around it. But I do think that the MVP has been kind of used as a prop for a lot of debate show talk, whether it's on TV or radio, and that's fine. I mean, we all, we're in this business, Lindsay, right? We all need something to talk about. But I've heard from people who say, gee, I never heard the MVP have this much back and forth to it. And I think it's just because there's a lot more time and space to fill with this discussion. In my mind, it's focus on what's right in front of you. Josh has had a great year. These other guys have done their thing. In my mind, too, consider that Josh's great season or great performance to be an MVP guy has been since October. And I feel like the other two names in this discussion, heavily in the discussion, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, kind of come along a little bit later. Just something to consider.
I think you make a perfect point there at the end in terms of everyone started talking about Josh Allen in the MVP conversation so early that it almost felt like you had to bring up the fact that now Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, who was carrying his team all the way through, obviously playoff hopes kind of killed tonight, but they kind of came up in the conversation a bit later. So I think that's where a lot of those conversations come up when Josh Allen has been having this type of season and has been having historic performances week after week now for quite a while. Now, obviously, the biggest news of the day that I want to get to now is just the fact that the playoff picture is set for at least the wild card round. The Bills are going to be hosting the Denver Broncos on Sunday at Highmark Stadium, a 1 o'clock kickoff. Vic, do you feel like this was the best scenario for the Bills?
I believe it was. When you look at the three possibilities side by side, having the Broncos here is one of the younger teams in the league, led by a rookie quarterback, making his first NFL playoff start in a very hostile environment that is Highmark Stadium, where the Bills, by the way, went 8-0. So there's that. Yeah, they're good, and he's good. Bo Nix, the rookie quarterback, good quarterback, having one of the better seasons of rookies, one of the better seasons of pretty much any quarterback. And they did put that 38-0 beatdown on the Kansas City Chiefs, but let's call them the Chiefs in this particular game. That's not the team that won 15 games, because most of the players responsible for those 15 wins, including Patrick Mahomes, they were on the sidelines. But still, a team that's deserving of a postseason appearance, but for the Bills' sake, I think the best draw. Because the other options, Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, red-hot Bengal team right down the stretch, winning those last, 5 games to really come in hot to the postseason if they could get there. But it was too little too late, and they needed too much help. The biggest help that they didn't get was the Chiefs beating the Broncos. That didn't happen. The Dolphins were the other team. Now, granted, they didn't look so good against the Jets, but keep in mind, they're in the stadium. Scoreboard is showing, and the games are being played simultaneously, Jets, Dolphins, and Broncos, Chiefs. They're seeing the Broncos jumped out to that early lead, and you could see a beatdown on the way. And their players, Tyreek Hill among them, admitting that they basically were checking out because their playoff hopes were dead before their game was over. And Tua Tagovailoa, their injured quarterback, didn't play against the Jets, but was expected to return for the postseason. Consider that. Consider it's a divisional team. They might have been a little more problematic. I'm not saying the Broncos are going to be a pushover. They're well coached. Sean Payton on the offensive side, Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator, and that defense is solid. If there's any area of strength for the Broncos, I would put it on that defense. But Josh Allen versus Bo Nix, Josh Allen versus a rookie, it's hard for me to see the rookie coming out on top.
And that honestly perfectly segues into my next question for you, just about experience in the playoffs, right? Because a lot of the times we hear about teams and we see teams play in the regular season and you really think that they might have a run. And then when it comes to the postseason, somehow they just can't pull out a win. How much of an advantage does that give to someone like Josh Allen, who the last 5 years or so has been in these situations among the rest of his teammates, really, versus a Broncos team that really hasn't been there, along with a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix?
Yeah, I'll start by saying this. This is the Broncos' first postseason appearance as a team since 2015, so that's a decent amount of time. Sean Payton, their head coach, definitely has postseason experience, definitely one of the better coaches in the game, a future Hall of Famer as a coach for sure, has won a Super Bowl when he was with New Orleans. There's a lot that he can bring to the table as a coach, but it was very interesting, the message that I saw the video of this it was in the postgame on CBS, where he said in the locker room, to his players, young and hungry was his message. You're young but hungry, and he said young and hungry is dangerous. Okay, I could buy that to a certain extent, but the operative word is still young. And in the Bills' case, experience does matter quite a bit, that they've been regulars to the postseason. and regulars as a number 2 seed. But it only matters, this experience only matters if they take from, and especially Josh Allen, but the whole team, and Josh has had his performances in the postseason that have been good enough to take this team the whole way. Other parts didn't come through. We can talk about 13 seconds, talk about defensive failings, etc. Talk about drop passes by Stephon Diggs, etc. But I'd say that it's more important that Josh and those who are returning from a team that, of course, had some change over this Bills roster, and the coaching staff especially, learn from the mistakes that have been made. Learn from whatever it was that prevented the Bills from taking that ultimate step to the Super Bowl. They're good enough to get there. You could argue that maybe it's happening 1 year sooner than a lot of us expected. This was going to be the step back year. Well, they didn't just step forward. They stepped forward by a lot. And I would think they go in with a great belief, regardless of what those of us on the outside were saying or thinking, that they're good enough to do it. But that experience you talk about, Lindsay, much more important that they actually learn from it and not just say, yeah, we've been here before, we know what to do.
And guess what, Vic? We've seen that plenty of times, honestly, already this season. Coaching-wise, some coaching decisions, had to learn from a couple of situations that, of course, they said, we're going to have to learn from that and move on from it. And as you said, obviously, you never want to lose those games, right, and put you in bad position. But now down the road, down the stretch, when it really matters most, you're going to think back on those situations and say, we've been there before, we can figure this out a different way. Something else that you kind of touched on there is just the fact that you definitely don't want to overlook this team. I think a lot of people, regardless whether this was the best scenario for the Bills or not, the last couple of years, the Bills in the Wildcard round, last year facing the Steelers, they were facing Mason Rudolph. The year before that was Skylar Thompson. This is a good team, rookie or not. Bo Nix is playing really good football right now. I mean, how important is that for this team to make sure? And I think they've done a good job of that, especially the last couple of weeks, knowing they clinched the division with 5 games left and still, had to keep it all together and tied up and keep moving forward. But just how important is that for this team to not overlook any opponent?
Oh, it's vital. I mean, they shouldn't ever feel that they've got it, locked up and all they have to do is show up. We've seen that act before. I felt like that was the case a couple of years ago against the Broncos, against the Bengals in the divisional round, and then taking on this Bronco team. Look, they're young, and they have a rookie quarterback. The thing that could be troublesome, if we want to put it that way, or a challenge, maybe that's the better word, for the Bills is the idea that they've progressively improved, that Bo Nix from early on had a lot more rough edges than he has now. He's still got some rough edges as a young quarterback. The team as a whole still has them. But I would credit Sean Payton for coaching some of that out of him, a lot of that out of him, and the team in general, and getting this player and this entire squad on the same page with him as a designer of offense, as a play caller. And keep in mind, there are things that I think they did in this game against the Chiefs that they wouldn't necessarily utilize against the Bills. And what I mean by that, just as the Bills have been, I think, keeping a shroud over much of what they have planned to face the Broncos since their first game against the Patriots, and it was true also against the Jets, that they are a team that the Broncos are a team that is well coached, and that there will be ideas and concepts from both Sean Payton, from defensive coordinator Vance Joseph, that the Bills, even with their best scouting and best film review, which they've been doing, and they've been doing certainly the more than just this today or this week, they've been preparing for this possibility along with some of the others that they wouldn't have seen yet, and that'll be an interesting thing to look at. And here's one more point about Bo Nix. He just might be again, from a distance, I don't have intimate knowledge knowing the guy, being around the guy at all, but from a distance, a guy that just might not know enough to be nervous. He just might not, walk into that stadium on Sunday and, with that crowd at its full-throated best and just not be rattled because, hey, I'm here. It's a bonus that I'm a rookie and I'm playing in a playoff game. And sometimes very young players treat it that way. Just let it happen naturally. And he does have the ability to run around. He will, I think, give the Bills some defensive issues that way. Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator of the Chiefs, before that game today, made a comment that the running that Bo Nix does reminds him of Josh Allen.
Another great point there, Vic, also because, you think about, as you said, when a rookie is in a situation like that, I actually think he also said before this game that pressure is a privilege, and we've heard that before. But there's definitely a bit more pressure on Josh Allen and this team as they've been building up their level of play these past couple of weeks versus the Broncos, like they're just making it in week 18, first time, as you said, since 2015. So that's definitely something that is interesting and something, as you said, that could maybe possibly play a role. The last thing that I just want to touch on really quick here is the fact that today's game against the Patriots, again, a loss, but it was meaningless. It didn't really matter. What mattered most is the fact that this team has to stay healthy. That's really the key, especially on defense, as we've seen, the backups in there today, a little bit of a mix of both, but just making sure that this team stays healthy for the postseason. Sean McDermott touching on it afterwards. Just how critical is that, Vic, as we head into postseason play?
It's everything. It is absolutely everything that they go into this in one piece. Just consider this. Mitch Trubisky, Mike White playing at quarterback. How inspiring was that? Not very, especially when Mike White came in there later on. And I'm not here to kind of dump on these two guys who are not starters, who are not expected to be as good at all as the guy in front of them, Josh Allen. But it just tells you how that goes, that it's a reminder that this team needs to have the healthiest Josh Allen possible, of course. And we know he's dealt with some injuries, but it starts there. And then going, into the whole roster, they I think for the most part seem to have everyone intact, and that's vital. But even the backups, because in a game like the one they had against the Patriots, somebody had to play. And some of those players who did play, a bunch of them are going to end up being active as backups for the game against the Broncos. And beyond that, they hope in the playoffs. So your depth, which is something on which this team has relied, especially on defense, and relied, on very well, is key. And then, one other point as far as the offense is concerned, this offensive line staying intact and healthy the whole year has contributed to it being, I think, one of the better groups in the league, and doing a superb job of keeping Allen upright, of opening those holes for James Cook and the rest of the running game. They were, pretty much rested in the Patriot game today. So that's another thing that I know was considered. And that is, after Allen, if you had to rank the next thing, or next element of what gives the Bills the best chance for a deep run, it's that offensive line.
And as you said, it seemed like they got out of today, backup starters, the whole 9 yards, healthy, clean, knock on wood, because that is going to be critical, again, as the Bills host the Broncos this Sunday, 1 o'clock at Highmark Stadium. You and I will be there, of course, and we will bring you all of that post-game coverage. But for now, for Vic Carucci, I'm Lindsay Moppert for Channel 2 Sports.